The Fed has given another $112 billion to essentially Wall Street. Now, let me take you through this because this is a story that we have been reporting and trying to raise questions as to why this is happening, right? The genesis of all of this, or how this was originally sold to us, was it's a one-time thing. Remember, the Fed essentially said it was simply a short-term liquidity issue, that it had to pump money into some banks and the repo market for maybe a day or two or maybe a week. Then we learned that they were doing it daily and continuing it to the tune of like $60 billion a day. And now we're learning it's $112 billion in both overnight and 14-day repos injected into the market. Joining us now, the author of Peak Trump, who was President Ronald Reagan's budget director, none other than David Stockman. David, thanks for being with us as usual. Is this what you do when you're in charge of the greatest economy in the history of the world? Did you hear me, David? Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, I lost your.
Yeah.
No, I lost your last part, but I think
you know where I'm going.
Question.
Tongue in cheek,
yes.
Right? I mean, we have the greatest economy in the history of the world. What the hell are we doing this for, right?
Yeah. Well, the answer is, we've got the greatest deficit in the history of the United States. There's money flooding into Wall Street. In other words, demand from the Treasury flooding into Wall Street. The market can't digest it all. The law of supply and demand hasn't been repealed. And so interest rates were pushing up and the Fed panicked. Now, we need to understand just how serious this is because we're at the tippy top of the longest business cycle in history, month 130 at 125. And in the last 4 months, if you could believe this, the Treasury has borrowed $800 billion, not in a year, in 4 months. And when all of that demand came into the bond pits, there wasn't enough supply available to finance it. Repo rates started to go up because remember, that's where the paper held by the dealers is financed in the so-called repo overnight or short-term market. And as the dealers' balance sheets became saturated with all this new Treasury issue, which they're required to borrow, they went to the repo market, tried to fund it. They fund 95% of what they buy, and this drove the whole thing up. So the Fed wanted you to believe that everything was under control. This was short-term, some plumbing issues down in some mysterious part of the bond market. None of this is true. What we have is the collision that I have been talking about for a long time, and that is our fiscal situation is out of control, and the Fed can't keep the interest rate pinned down to 1.55%, where it is today, below inflation, and still see all of this massive amount of Treasury debt financed. So that's the problem. Supply and demand, a collision. The day of reckoning is arriving. That's what's going on.
And the day of reckoning, David, we're down to about 45 seconds, but can you explain what that day of reckoning might be and when we might experience it?
Well, I think, yes, I think the day of reckoning is that we have so much debt to finance. Trump has made it far worse. He's been adding annually far more debt, $185 billion a year than any other president. And as a result of that, interest rates are going to rise, and that's going to spook the stock market, and we're going to have a big correction. And this greatest ever economy is going to be shown for what it really is, and that is a house of cards based on unsustainable debt and money printing that we can't continue.
David Stockman, very few people like him in terms of both knowledge, candor, and man, you're a truth teller. We appreciate you coming on, David Stockman. Thanks again. All right.
Thank you.